Chapter XLIV. Te Deum for the victory of Lens. The bustle which had been observed by Henrietta Maria, and for which she had vainly sought to discover a reason, was occasioned by the battle of Lens, announced by the prince's messenger, the Duc de Chatelain, who had taken such a noble part in the engagement. He was, besides, charged to hang 25 flags, taken from the Lorraine party, as well as from the Spaniards, upon the arches of Notre Dame. Such news was decisive; it destroyed, in favour of the court. The struggle commenced with Parliament. The motive given for all the taxes summarily imposed, and to which the Parliament had made opposition, was the necessity of sustaining the honour of France, and the uncertain hope of beating the enemy. Now, since the affair of Nordlingen, they had experienced nothing but reverses. The Parliament had a plea for calling Mazarin to account for imaginary victories, always promised, ever deferred, but this time there really had been fighting, a triumph and a complete one, and this all knew so well that it was a double victory for the court, a victory at home and abroad, so that even when the young king learned the news he exclaimed, "Ah, gentlemen of the Parliament, we shall see what you will say now." Upon which the queen had pressed the royal child to her heart, whose haughty and unruly sentiments were in such harmony with her own. A council was called on the same evening, but nothing transpired of what had been decided on. It was only known that on the following Sunday a Te Deum, then, the Prussians arose with joy. At that period a Te Deum was a grand affair. This kind of ceremony had not then been abused, and it produced a great effect. The shops were deserted, houses closed, every one wished to see the young king with his mother, and the famous Cardinal Mazarin, whom they hated so much that no one wished to be deprived of his presence. Moreover, great liberty prevailed throughout the immense crowd. Every opinion was openly expressed and chorused, so to speak, of coming insurrection, as the 1,000 bells of all the Paris churches rang out the Te Deum, the police belonging to the city being formed by the city itself. Nothing threatening presented itself to disturb this concert of universal hatred, or freeze the frequent scoffs of slanderous lips. Nevertheless, at 8 o'clock in the morning the regiment of the Queen's Guards, commanded by Gutent, under whom was his nephew Comminges, marched publicly, preceded by drums and trumpets, filing off from the Palais Royal as far as Notre Dame, a manoeuvre which the Prussians witnessed tranquilly, delighted as they were with military music and brilliant uniforms. Friquet had put on his Sunday clothes, under the pretext of having a swollen face, which he had managed to simulate by introducing a handful of cherry kernels into one side of his mouth, and had procured a whole holiday from Bazin. On leaving Bazin, Friquet started off to the Palais Royal, where he arrived at the moment of the turning out of the regiment of guards, as he had only gone there for the enjoyment of seeing it and hearing the music. He took his place at their head, meeting the drum on 2 pieces of slate and passing from that exercise to that of the trumpet, which he counterfeited quite naturally with his mouth, in a manner which had more than once called forth the praises of amateurs of imitative harmony. This amusement lasted from the Barriere de Surgens to the place of Notre Dame, and Friquet found in it very real enjoyment, but when at last the regiment separated, penetrated the heart of the city, and placed itself at the extremity of the Rue Saint Christophe, near the Rue Cicatrix, in which Broussel lived, then Friquet remembered that he had not had breakfast, and after thinking in which direction he had better turn his steps in order to accomplish this important act of the day, he reflected deeply and decided that Councillor Broussel should bear the cost of this repast. In consequence he took to his heels, arrived breathlessly at the councillor's door, and knocked violently. His mother, the councillor's old servant, opened it. "What dost thou here? Good for nothing," she said, "and why art thou not at Notre Dame?" "I have been there, mother," said Friquet, but I saw things happen of which Master Brousel ought to be warned. And so, with Monsieur Bazin's permission, you know, mother, Monsieur Bazin, the Vergery came to speak to Monsieur Brousel. And what hast thou to say, boy, to Monsieur Brousel? I wish to tell him, replied Friquet, screaming with all his might, that there is a whole regiment of guards coming this way. And as I hear everywhere that at the court they are ill disposed to him, I wish to warn him that he may be on his guard. Brousel heard the scream of the young oddity, and, enchanted with this excess of zeal, came down to the first floor, for he was, in truth, working in his room on the second. "Well," said he, "friend, what matters the regiment of guards to us? And art thou not mad to make such a disturbance? Knowest thou not that it is the custom of these soldiers to act thus, and that it is usual for the regiment to form themselves into two solid walls when the king goes by?" Friquet counterfeited surprise, and twisting his new cap around in his fingers, said, "It is not astonishing for you to know it, Monsieur Brousel, who knows everything; but as for me, by holy truth, I did not know it, and I thought I would give you good advice. You must not be angry with me for that, Monsieur Brousel. On the contrary, my boy, on the contrary, I am pleased with your zeal. Dame Ninette, look for those apricots which Madame de Longueville sent to us yesterday from Noisy, and give half a dozen of them to your son, with a crust of new bread. Oh, thank you, sir, thank you, Monsieur Brousel," said Friquet, "I am so fond of apricots." Brousel then proceeded to his wife's room and asked for breakfast. It was 9 o'clock. The councillor placed himself at the window. The street was completely deserted, but in the distance was heard, like the noise of the tide rushing in, the deep hum of the populous waves increasing now around Notre Dame.